Hey there, my name is Chris Acton with Acting Creative, and this is a handwoven experience, episode 79. And in this episode, I'm going to talk all about dealing with your weft ends. See, every weaver has to deal with these little bits at the edges of their fabric as they're weaving along. So, I'm going to talk about some different ideas for you today. First of all, always keep in mind what your fabric is for. Are you creating fabric that will then be cut into smaller pieces? If that's the case, I wouldn't deal with these at all. I would make sure that you always leave your ends kind of off to the side, because then you won't have to worry about any little kind of fuzzies popping up in the middle of the fabric. You don't need to work it in at all. Save yourself the time and energy. Now, if you're working on a project where you need nice clean edges, it's going to be a scarf, table runner, some placemats, whatever it is. In that case, we need to address our weft ends. Now, the goal with our weft ends is to make them vanish, no matter what the situation is. And as you're sitting at the loom, you might encounter two different scenarios where you're working with your weft ends. The number one is when you are changing colors, and number two is when you run out of weft yarn. So let's talk about the first one first. So at my project here, I have this black, see that guy there? This was from my row here. Now, I'm not gonna do black again, so I have my little tail sitting out there. Now, if you look, light green was my very next row, so it doesn't make sense for me to work it into that row there because it's gonna show up. So for now, I'm gonna leave it hanging off to the side and I'll address it once it comes off the loom. But I'm getting ready to start this kind of middle green color. And let me show you an easy way to just kind of work that end right in. Okay, so here, I'm gonna start with this. I'm just gonna leave, I don't know, a couple inches, 2 inches, not more than 3. You don't need a big tail. This is the second throw. I'm not gonna worry about that tail yet till I get to the third throw where I'm going back the same direction. Here we go, put that in like this. And I'm gonna take my little tail right here, and I'm just gonna wiggle it right in so it blends right in. No one will ever know. So that is a really easy way to save yourself some time later by catching those ends as you're at the loom working along. Now, the second situation that you might run into is when you run out of weft yarn, because it's gonna happen. If you have any length project, you're gonna get to the bottom of the bobbin like this one almost is, and you're gonna have to kind of contend with how to work in those ends there. So a couple things here. First of all, I always recommend that you work in your ends on either side of the fabric. Don't do it right in the middle. That's going to be a really obvious spot, and we don't need to make it obvious. These are supposed to blend in and just vanish. So when you run out of your color, overlap it with your starter for the next bobbin. Just overlap it in one of these spots, kind of towards one of your edges. It'll kind of fade into the fabric. You are good to go. So those are a couple situations as you're sitting at the loom. Let's talk about once the fabric comes off the loom. All right, so my fabric is off the loom, and I have all these little ends to deal with. See those guys there? So easy enough. Get a nice needle. I've got one with a nice big fat eye because I don't see worth crap these days. But take a needle, put your yarn in there, and just hand weave it back into your fabric. For instance, see this kind of creamy right here? I would just take it and then just work it right back into that first little row right there. Honestly, it doesn't matter where. You just need to hide it back in the fabric. Easy enough, right? Now, something to keep in mind is if your fabric is going to have a distinct kind of a top side and a back side, then wiggle your weft yarns back in on the back side. That's a nice way to hide them even further. If your fabric doesn't have a distinct kind of top and bottom or front and back, don't worry about it. You can kind of do a little of both sides, whatever feels right to you. And the last little point I will leave you with is that if you're working with a fabric like that one that is going to be going through the washer and dryer, work all your ends in and then put it through the washer and dryer and wait to trim it up really nice. Because what happens is when it comes out of the washer and dryer, you're going to want to go back and cut your little ends real close to the fabric so it really vanishes then. But I learned this the hard way. is that if you trim it really nice close to the fabric and then put it in the washer and dryer, you're still gonna get little fuzzies that pop up. So just hold off on that. Work your little weft ends back into the fabric, put it through the washer and dryer, and then take your scissors and do kind of the finishing little cuts so it's nice and blended in with the rest of the fabric. All right, friends, hopefully that gave you a couple little things to think about when you're pondering how to get your weft ends to just blend in with the rest of your fabric. All right, friends, have a fabulous week. And of course, happy weaving.